Every year at about this time, I'm struck by the contrast between what's going on in the secular culture and what we're doing here as followers of Jesus. Out there, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Radio stations have been playing 24-hour Christmas music for weeks already. Stores have red ribbons and Santas and trees everywhere. Christmas movies are lined up for binge watching. But here, for us Christians, it's not Christmas yet. It's Advent. We are waiting for Jesus to arrive, both for him to be born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago and for him to return in the future to bring in the kingdom of God. We sing Advent hymns that speak of our hope for the Messiah. We wear purple as a sign of the King we are waiting for. We listen to prophets' promises that God is coming to save us. And instead of jolly old Santa Claus ho-ho-hoing as he passes out gifts, we have John the Baptist. John is eccentric, to say the least. He wears camel's hair clothes with a leather belt around his waist, not loose-fitting wool or linen like normal people. He eats locusts and wild honey foraged from the wilderness. If you like that, more power to you. Let's just say this diet is out of the ordinary. John did not invent his wardrobe or food himself. It calls to mind a figure from the Jewish people's past, Elijah, the greatest prophet of ancient Israel. Elijah is described as a hairy man who wears a leather belt around his waist. He spends a lot of time in the wilderness eating whatever he can forage. Elijah is one of only a couple of biblical figures who don't die. A chariot of fire and horses of fire sweep up Elijah, and he's assumed bodily into heaven. Because Elijah did not die, he can come back. The prophet Malachi says that Elijah will return just before God's day of judgment. So when John the Baptist shows up looking and acting like Elijah, it sets people wondering, has Elijah come back? If so, the day of judgment must be near. There's only one place a prophet like John the Baptist would be: the wilderness. Wilderness is a place of danger. There's not much to eat there. Water is scarce and you can get dehydrated easily. Wild animals might attack you. You might get lost and wander around for days until you die of exposure. Wilderness is also where you encounter God. Moses, David, Elijah, all of them meet God in the wilderness, and that encounter with God shakes up their lives. Away from crowds of people, away from the distractions of cities and work, there is enough solitude and space and silence in the wilderness to hear God's voice. Whether you are looking for God or not, that is where God will find you. John looks like Elijah. He stays where Elijah did. He proclaims judgment like Elijah. The axe is lying at the root of the trees. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. The one who is coming has a winnowing fork in his hand. He will gather his wheat into the granary, but the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. This sounds threatening. No publicist approved this message. It's the kind of thing that should drive people away. But it doesn't. Crowds are coming out to hear John. Throngs of people stream from Jerusalem and its surrounding towns into the wilderness. Not just ordinary people, but Sadducees, the priestly elite of the temple in Jerusalem, and Pharisees who practiced a rigorous piety out of love for God. They are there to listen to John too. They have to know that John will call them a brood of vipers. They've been told about John's preaching. That's how they know to come out here to the wilderness. These crowds are hungry for condemnation. Why? Why would anyone choose to hear this harsh judgment? In today's world, we're primed to hear judgment as negative, something to fear and resist. A certain kind of Christianity's obsession with hell sets us up for that. But John is not talking about eternal punishment. He's talking about judgment, which doesn't have to be negative. Every single human being is imperfect. All of us have done wrong and fallen short and gone astray. Some of us more than others, yes, but all of us fall short. Unqualified total affirmation feels fake because it is fake. Someone who can't acknowledge any of our flaws is hiding the truth from us. And God, who knows every molecule of our being, sees those flaws better than everyone. Recognizing what we have done wrong is essential to growing and changing. Sometimes we need someone else to point out where we have gone astray so that we can find the right path again. Judgment is uncomfortable, yes. We're likely to hear something we disagree with, something that upsets or offends us. But there is comfort in hearing the truth too. It affirms what we know about ourselves, that we are imperfect. I think that's why crowds of people are hiking into the wilderness to hear John the Baptist, because he tells them the truth about themselves, especially the Sadducees and Pharisees. John's not going to fawn all over them like sycophants always do to people with power and influence. John will speak to them with stark honesty. And it's only by knowing the truth about themselves that all these crowds of people can grow and change and become who God created them to be. That fire that John describes, where chaff and trees that don't bear good fruit are thrown, also harks back to the Old Testament. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Malachi talk about a refiner's fire for purifying metal. Raw ore is put into a very hot fire that burns away impurities, leaving pure silver or iron or whatever. That can happen for human beings too, metaphorically. The fire of suffering or trouble can burn away the less appealing aspects of our character. One of my favorite hymns, How Firm a Foundation, has God speaking, "When through fiery trials thy pathway shall lie, my grace, all sufficient, shall be thy supply. The flame shall not hurt thee. I only design thy dross to consume and thy gold to refine." What if John the Baptist's judgment is not about sorting bad people and good people, but calling out the flaws and shortfalls within each imperfect person? What if John is inviting each person to thresh the crop of themselves, to separate their own grain and chaff and gather the wheat into the granary while sending the chaff off to be burned? We might understand why that would appeal to the crowds who are seeking John out. I would certainly like for the chaff of myself, my selfishness and judgmentalism, my impatience, my need to be right, all the weaknesses I can see and those only God knows, I would love for all of that to be thrown into unquenchable fire so they can never trouble me again. I would love to be left with only those things in me that bear good fruit. Perhaps you would like that too, to be pruned and refined and purified so that you can be more fully who God created you to be. The writer David Frum reflected in his podcast this week on reports that American forces killed the survivors of a wrecked ship accused of smuggling drugs. Whether this counts as a war crime or a straight-up murder, it is wrong. It is wrong. Frum observes that the lasting damage of actions like this is that they teach American troops to commit crimes, and they teach civilians to accept the unacceptable. Frum is asking how societies recover from a moral collapse like this. He thinks it has to start with individuals. He says, the only way is to resolve to find some way to come back to the people we were, to rediscover the old principles. In other words, to place ourselves under judgment, to cut down the trees within ourselves that bear bad fruit so that the good fruit can flourish and grow. That's the invitation of Advent, to follow John the Baptist into the wilderness, where we encounter God, where God transforms us into the people God created us to be. Christmas trees and Santa Claus and matching pajama sets for the whole family won't transform us, but Advent will. Wilderness isn't always a physical place far from the city. Sometimes the wilderness is within us. It might look like grief, or broken relationships, or loneliness, or drinking too much, or feeling so overwhelmed by our shortcomings that we don't like ourselves very much. That's where John the Baptist calls us to go. The day of judgment is near, when God will sort the wheat from the chaff within each person, prune the trees that aren't bearing fruit to encourage new growth in the trees that are bearing abundantly. Even now, the axe is lying at the root of the trees. The unquenchable fire is burning high, ready to purify us, our dross to consume, and our gold to refine.